The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Elena Martinez wiped down the counter for the third time that day. Her weathered hands moved with practiced precision, even though there was nothing left to clean. At 62, she had spent most of her life taking care of others. First, her late husband Miguel, then her son Lucas, and now her daughter-in-law Maria and the grandchildren she rarely got to see. Elena had been awake since 5 in the morning, as was her habit. She had learned long ago that starting the day before anyone else gave her a sense of peace and control that carried her through whatever challenges lay ahead. This morning, like so many others in recent months, she had needed that peace more than ever. The house was a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood outside San Antonio, Texas. Miguel had bought it 30 years ago when Lucas was just a baby, working double shifts at the auto plant to make the mortgage payments. Elena remembered how proud he had been the day they moved in, how he had carried her over the threshold, even though they had been married for 3 years already. "This is where we'll raise our boy," he had said, his accent thick with emotion and the Spanish that still colored his English after 20 years in America. "This is where he'll grow up to be whatever he wants to be." Miguel had been gone for 5 years now, taken by a heart attack that came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena still missed him every day, still found herself setting out 2 coffee cups in the morning before remembering that she was alone. But she had Lucas, and that had been enough to keep her going through the grief and the loneliness. Elena paused at the kitchen sink, staring out at the small garden she had planted when Lucas was just a boy. The tomatoes were ripening now, red and full, just like the ones she used to pick for his favorite sandwiches before school. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, but the memories were still vivid. She could see 8-year-old Lucas running through the backyard with his toy planes, making whooshing sounds as he soared them through the air. "Mommy, look! I'm flying to the moon!" he would shout, his dark hair catching the sunlight as he spun in circles with his arms outstretched. "Be careful, mijo," she would call back, but she had loved watching him dream. Even then, she had known that those dreams would take him far from home someday. She had been proud of his ambition, proud of the way he threw himself into everything she did with such passion and determination. Lucas had always been exceptional. He had been valedictorian of his high school class, captain of the soccer team, and president of the student council. Elena had attended every game, every speech, every award ceremony, beaming with pride as her son collected accolades and achievements. When he announced that he wanted to join the Air Force and become a pilot, Elena had been terrified and proud in equal measure. "Are you sure, mijo?" she had asked him the night he told her about his decision. They had been sitting at this same kitchen table, sharing a late dinner after one of his soccer games. "I'm sure, Mommy," he had said, his young face serious with determination. "I want to serve my country, and I want to fly. This is my chance to do both." Elena had nodded, swallowing her fears. She had raised him to follow his dreams, and she wouldn't stand in his way now, even if it meant letting him go into danger. The years that followed had been a whirlwind of military academies, flight training, and brief visits home between deployments. Elena had learned to live with the constant worry that came with being a military mother, had learned to find joy in phone calls and letters, in the precious few days when Lucas could come home. "Lucas called yesterday," she had told Maria the night before, hoping to share her joy. "He says the training is going well. He might get leave soon." Maria had barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice," she had replied in that flat tone Elena had grown to recognize, the tone that meant the conversation was over before it began. It hadn't always been this way. When Lucas first introduced Maria 5 years ago, Elena had welcomed her with open arms. She remembered the nervous young woman who had clutched Lucas's hand during their first dinner together, asking Elena for her secret to making the perfect rice and beans. Elena had been so happy to share her recipes, her stories, her love for cooking. She had dreamed of the daughter she never had. Maria had been 22 then, fresh out of college with a degree in business administration and dreams of her own. She was beautiful in a delicate way, with long dark hair and expressive brown eyes that lit up when she laughed. Elena had loved her immediately, had seen the way Lucas looked at her with such adoration, such hope for the future. "She reminds me of your father when he was young," Elena had told Lucas after that first dinner. "She has that same fire in her eyes, that same determination to make something of herself." Lucas had grinned, that boyish smile that had been melting Elena's heart since he was a toddler. "I'm going to marry her, Mommy," he had said with the confidence of a young man in love. "She's the one." Elena had been thrilled. She had begun planning immediately, dreaming of the wedding, of the grandchildren who would fill this house with laughter again, of the daughter-in-law who would be her companion and friend through the years to come. The courtship had been beautiful to watch. Lucas would drive down from his base every chance he got, sometimes arriving at midnight just to spend a day with Maria before having to drive back. Elena would prepare elaborate meals for the three of them, delighting in the way Maria praised her cooking and asked for recipes. "You have to teach me to make your enchiladas," Maria had said one evening, rolling up her sleeves to help with the dishes. "Lucas talks about them constantly when we're apart." "Of course, mija," Elena had replied, the endearment rolling naturally off her tongue. A wife should know how to make her husband's favorite foods. They had spent hours in the kitchen together, Elena patiently teaching Maria the techniques passed down through generations of Martinez women. How to char the chilies just right, how to blend the spices until they sang in perfect harmony, how to roll the enchiladas so they wouldn't fall apart in the pan. "My grandmother taught me these recipes when I was just a girl," Elena had explained, watching Maria carefully measure the cumin. "She learned them from her mother, and her mother learned them from hers. Someday, you'll teach them to your daughters." Maria had smiled at that, her eyes soft with emotion. "I hope so," she had said. "I hope I can be half the cook you are, half the mother you are." Elena had felt her heart swell with love for this young woman who seemed to understand the importance of family traditions, who seemed eager to become part of the Martinez legacy. The wedding had been beautiful. Elena had spent weeks helping Maria plan every detail, from the flowers to the music. She had sewn beads onto Maria's dress by hand, working late into the night to make sure everything was perfect. When Lucas and Maria exchanged vows, Elena had cried tears of pure happiness. The ceremony had been held at the old Catholic church where Elena had been married 35 years earlier, where Lucas had been baptized as a baby. Father Rodriguez, who had known the Martinez family for decades, had performed the service with tears in his own eyes. "Do you, Maria Elena Suarez, take Lucas Miguel Martinez to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," Maria had whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Elena had watched from the front pew, her heart full of joy and hope. Miguel's absence was a sharp pain in her chest, but she knew he would have been proud of their son, proud of the beautiful woman he was marrying, proud of the man he had become. After the ceremony, during the reception at the community center, Maria had found Elena during a quiet moment between dances. "Thank you," Maria had said, taking Elena's hands in hers. "Thank you for welcoming me into your family, for treating me like a daughter from the very beginning. I know Lucas got his kind heart from you." Elena hugged her new daughter-in-law tightly, breathing in the scent of her perfume and the flowers in her hair. "You are my daughter now," Elena had whispered. "In every way that matters, you are my daughter." It was during that conversation that Maria had made the promise that would later haunt Elena's darkest days. "I promise to take care of your mother like she's my own," Maria had whispered to Lucas during the ceremony, and Elena's heart had swelled with love for this young woman who would now be part of their family. The first year of marriage had been everything Elena had hoped for. Maria and Lucas had moved into the house with Elena, saving money for their own place while Lucas completed his advanced flight training. The house had been full of life and laughter, with Maria helping Elena cook family meals and the three of them spending evenings on the front porch, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. "I want at least 3 children," Maria had said one warm summer evening, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder as they watched the sunset. "2 boys and a girl." "I want whatever you want," Lucas had replied, kissing the top of her head, "as long as they have your beautiful eyes and your sweet nature." Elena had smiled, already imagining the grandchildren who would fill her arms and her heart. She had begun knitting baby blankets that first year, soft yellow and green ones that would work for either boys or girls, storing them carefully in the cedar chest that had belonged to her own mother. "I promise to take care of your mother like she's my own," Maria had whispered to Lucas during the ceremony, and Elena's heart had swelled with love for this young woman who would now be part of their family. But promises, Elena had learned, could be as fragile as morning dew. The change had been gradual at first, so subtle that Elena had convinced herself she was imagining things. After Lucas shipped out for his first deployment to Germany, Maria seemed different. The easy laughter was gone, replaced by polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes. The long conversations over coffee became shorter, more stilted, until they disappeared altogether. At first, Elena had tried to understand. Maria was young, barely 25, and suddenly she was managing a household alone while her husband served overseas. She had her own job at the insurance company downtown, dealing with difficult clients and demanding bosses all day. It had to be stressful, overwhelming even. Elena had tried to be patient, tried to give Maria space while still being helpful. "Would you like me to start dinner?" Elena would ask when Maria came home from work, her shoulders tense with the weight of the day. "No, I can handle it," Maria would reply, not unkindly at first, but with a distance that hadn't been there before. Elena would retreat to her room or to the garden, trying not to feel hurt by the dismissal. She told herself that Maria needed time to adjust, time to find her footing as the woman of the house. Elena remembered how overwhelming it had felt when Miguel had first left her alone with baby Lucas during his long shifts at the plant. The responsibility could be crushing, especially when you were young and unsure of yourself. But as the weeks turned into months, the distance grew into something colder, more deliberate. Maria's responses became shorter, her glances more dismissive. When Elena would try to share stories about Lucas's childhood or offer advice about managing the house, Maria would simply nod and walk away, leaving Elena feeling foolish for speaking at all. The first signs of real trouble came during Lucas's second month away. Elena had been in the kitchen preparing one of Lucas's favorite meals to freeze and save for his return when Maria came home from work in an obvious bad mood. "What are you doing?" Maria had asked, her voice sharp in a way Elena had never heard before. "I'm making Lucas's favorite enchiladas," Elena had replied, confused by the tone. "I thought I would freeze them so we could have them when he comes home on leave." "He's not coming home for months," Maria had snapped. "And when he does, he might want something different. You can't just assume he still likes the same things he liked as a child." Elena had been hurt by the criticism, but she had tried to stay positive. "You're right, of course," she had said. "Maybe you could call him and ask what he'd like me to make." "Maybe you could call him yourself instead of always going through me," Maria had replied, then stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Elena standing there with tears in her eyes. That night, Elena had lain awake, wondering what she had done wrong. She replayed the conversation over and over, trying to understand where she had misstepped, how she had offended her daughter-in-law. By morning, she had convinced herself that Maria was simply stressed, that the comment had been taken out of proportion by her own sensitive feelings. But the incidents began to multiply. Elena would clean the house thoroughly, only to find Maria going behind her, re-cleaning everything with obvious irritation. Elena would offer to help with laundry, only to be told that she didn't do it right, that the clothes came out wrinkled, or that she used too much detergent. "I can handle the household chores myself," Maria would say, her voice tight with frustration. "You don't need to worry about them." Elena began to feel like she was walking on eggshells in her own home. She tried to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. She would slip out to tend her garden early in the morning before Maria woke up, and she would retreat to her room immediately after dinner, giving Maria space to relax and unwind. The isolation was painful, but Elena told herself it was temporary. When Lucas returned, things would go back to normal. Maria was just overwhelmed, just struggling to find her place in a house that had belonged to Elena for so many years. It was natural that there would be an adjustment period. "I can handle it," Maria would say, not unkindly at first, but with a distance that hadn't been there before. Elena told herself it was natural. Maria was young, barely 25, and suddenly she was managing a household alone while her husband served overseas. It had to be stressful. Elena tried to be understanding, tried to give her space while still being helpful. But as the months passed, the distance grew into something colder. Maria's responses became shorter, her glances more dismissive. When Elena would try to share stories about Lucas's childhood or offer advice about managing the house, Maria would simply nod and walk away. The first time Maria refused to let Elena eat at the dining room table, Elena thought it must be a misunderstanding. It was a Friday evening in late July, the air thick with Texas heat and the promise of thunderstorms. Elena had spent the day making tamales, a labor-intensive process that had taken her most of the afternoon. She had been looking forward to sharing them with Maria, remembering how much her daughter-in-law had once enjoyed learning to make them. "But this is where we always eat," Elena had said gently, standing in the doorway with her plate of food, confused by Maria's sudden declaration that she couldn't join her at the table. "I'm having friends over," Maria had replied, without looking up from her phone. "You can eat in the kitchen tonight." Elena had nodded and retreated to the small kitchen table, telling herself it was just for one evening. But as she sat alone in the kitchen, she could hear the television in the living room, could see that Maria was alone at the dining room table, scrolling through her phone. No friends ever came that night, and Elena ate her carefully prepared tamales in silence, the taste turning to ash in her mouth. The next week, it happened again, then again. Soon, Elena found herself eating every meal at the small kitchen table while Maria used the dining room, even when she was alone. The kitchen table was barely big enough for one person, meant for quick breakfasts and late-night snacks, not for the family meals Elena had always cherished. "It's more comfortable in here anyway," Elena tried to convince herself, but the words felt hollow. The dining room table was where she had shared thousands of meals with Miguel, where she had helped Lucas with his homework, where the Martinez family had celebrated birthdays and holidays and all the small moments that made up a life together. When Elena tried to understand what had changed, Maria's response was always vague and dismissive. "I just need my space," she would say when Elena asked if she had done something wrong. "I need to feel like this is my home too, not just a place where I'm visiting." Elena had tried to make sense of this. She had lived in this house for 30 years, had raised her son here, had buried her husband from this front porch. But she understood that Maria needed to feel comfortable and welcome, needed to feel like the woman of the house. Elena had tried to step back, even further, had stopped rearranging the furniture or suggesting changes to the decor. The next week, it happened again, then again. Soon, Elena found herself eating every meal at the small kitchen table while Maria used the dining room, even when she was alone. "It's more comfortable in here anyway," Elena tried to convince herself, but the words felt hollow. The kitchen table was meant for quick breakfasts and late-night snacks, not for the family meals she had always cherished. When Lucas called from his base in Germany, Elena forced brightness into her voice. The international calls were expensive and brief, made even more precious by their rarity. Elena treasured every word, every laugh, every story Lucas shared about his training and his fellow pilots. "How are things at home, Mom?" he would ask, his voice crackling through the international connection. "Is Maria taking good care of you?" Elena would look toward the dining room, where Maria would often be sitting during these calls, sometimes listening, sometimes pointedly ignoring the conversation. "Everything is wonderful, mijo," she would lie, her heart breaking a little more each time. "Maria is taking such good care of me. You don't need to worry about anything here. Just focus on your training and stay safe." She could hear the relief in his voice when she said this, and she knew she was doing the right thing. Lucas had worked so hard to get into the Air Force, had dreamed of flying since he was a little boy building paper airplanes at her kitchen table. He didn't need to be distracted by problems at home, didn't need to worry about domestic tensions when he should be concentrating on mastering skills that could mean the difference between life and death in the cockpit. "Tell me about your flying lessons," Elena would say, steering the conversation away from home. "Are you getting close to flying solo?" Lucas's voice would light up with excitement as he described his training, the sophisticated aircraft he was learning to pilot, the thrill of seeing the world from thousands of feet in the air. Elena would close her eyes and picture her little boy with his toy planes, now grown into a man living out his childhood dreams. "I wish Dad could see this," Lucas would say sometimes, his voice growing soft with emotion. "I wish he could know that his son is really going to fly." "He knows, mijo," Elena would reply, her own eyes filling with tears. "Wherever he is, he knows, and he's proud of you." But the problems at home were getting worse, no matter how hard Elena tried to hide them from Lucas. Maria had stopped speaking to Elena altogether, unless absolutely necessary. When Elena would say good morning, Maria would grunt or ignore her completely. When Elena offered to help with household chores, Maria would redo whatever Elena had done, making it clear that her efforts weren't welcome or good enough. The worst part was how Maria spoke about Elena to others. Elena would overhear phone conversations where Maria complained about having to deal with Lucas's mother, as if Elena were a burden rather than family. These conversations were like knives to Elena's heart, each cruel word cutting deeper than the last. "She's always underfoot," Maria would say to her sister Rosa on the phone, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "I can't wait until Lucas gets back so we can figure out what to do about her. Maybe we can convince him that she needs to move to one of those senior communities." Elena would retreat to her room during these calls, pressing her pillow over her ears to block out the sound of her daughter-in-law discussing her like she was a problem to be solved, rather than a person with feelings, a woman who had welcomed Maria into her home and her heart. But the problems were getting worse. Maria stopped speaking to Elena altogether unless absolutely necessary. When Elena would say good morning, Maria would grunt or ignore her completely. When Elena offered to help with household chores, Maria would redo whatever Elena had done, making it clear that her efforts weren't good enough. The worst part was how Maria spoke about Elena to others. Elena would overhear phone conversations where Maria complained about having to deal with Lucas's mother, as if Elena were a burden rather than family. "She's always underfoot," Maria would say to her sister on the phone. "I can't wait until Lucas gets back so we can figure out what to do about her." Elena felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and quieter with each passing day. She began to doubt herself, wondering if she really was in the way, if her presence in the home Lucas had bought for his family was truly unwelcome. She started questioning every word she spoke, every action she took, second-guessing herself constantly. She began to spend more time in her room, a small space that had once been Lucas's bedroom. She had moved in there after Miguel died, wanting to feel closer to her son by sleeping surrounded by his childhood memories. The room was filled with his old trophies, his high school graduation photo, model airplanes he had built as a teenager. It was her sanctuary, the one place in the house where she still felt welcome. Elena would lie on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where she had gone wrong. She had tried so hard to be helpful without being intrusive, to be present without being overbearing. She had given Maria space when she asked for it, had stepped back from household responsibilities when her help wasn't wanted. But nothing she did seemed to be right. Some days, Elena barely spoke at all. She would move through the house like a ghost, cleaning quietly, preparing meals that she would eat alone in the kitchen, tending her garden in the early morning hours when Maria was still asleep. She began to lose weight, her clothes hanging loose on her shrinking frame. Food lost its taste when eaten in isolation and silence. The neighbors began to notice the change. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door and had been Elena's friend for 15 years, commented on how quiet Elena had become. "I haven't seen you working in your garden much lately," Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon when she encountered Elena at the mailbox. "Are you feeling all right, honey?" Elena forced a smile, the expression feeling foreign on her face. "Oh, I'm fine. Just giving Maria more time to settle in, you know. She's still adjusting to having me around." Mrs. Patterson frowned, clearly wanting to say more, but Elena hurried inside before the conversation could continue. She couldn't bear to have anyone else see how small she had become, how invisible she felt in her own home. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. Elena had spent the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, hoping to ease some of Maria's burden. She had vacuumed every room, dusted all the furniture, and prepared dinner, a recipe for chicken and rice that had been Lucas's favorite since he was small. When Maria came home from her job at the insurance office, she surveyed Elena's work with obvious annoyance. "I told you not to move my things," Maria snapped, seeing that Elena had carefully dusted around the pictures on the mantelpiece. "I was just trying to help," Elena said softly. "I made your favorite chicken recipe." "It's not my favorite," Maria replied coldly. "It's Lucas's favorite. Everything in this house is about Lucas, isn't it? Lucas's pictures, Lucas's trophies, Lucas's mother cooking Lucas's food." Elena felt as if she had been slapped. "I just wanted to make something nice for dinner." "Well, I don't want it," Maria said, her voice rising. "I'm tired of eating your food, tired of pretending to like your cooking, tired of having to share my own home with you." "This is my home, too," Elena said quietly, finding a spark of courage she thought she had lost. "Lucas wanted me to stay here. He asked you to take care of me." "Lucas isn't here," Maria shot back, "and I'm done pretending that you're welcome at my table." She stormed over to the carefully prepared dinner, scraped Elena's portion onto a paper plate, and set it down on the kitchen floor next to the dog's water bowl. "There," she said, her voice sharp and cruel. "That's where you can eat from now on, with the rest of the animals." Elena stared at the plate on the floor, her heart shattering into pieces. She looked up at Maria, searching for any sign that this was some terrible joke, but Maria's face was hard and unmoved. With shaking hands, Elena knelt down beside the plate. She couldn't eat, couldn't even think of putting food in her mouth while sitting on the cold tile floor, but she didn't know what else to do. She had nowhere else to go, no other family to turn to. From that night forward, every meal was served the same way. Maria would eat at the dining room table while Elena sat on the kitchen floor, her food served on paper plates like scraps for a pet. The humiliation was unbearable, but Elena endured it, telling herself it was temporary, that Lucas would return soon and things would go back to normal. When Lucas called, Elena worked even harder to hide the truth. "I'm eating very well," she would tell him. "Maria is such a good cook." This wasn't technically a lie, Elena reasoned. Maria did cook well, even if Elena was eating it off the floor. "And you two are getting along okay?" Lucas would press, something in his mother's voice making him worry. "Oh yes, we're like mother and daughter," Elena would say, and her heart would break a little more with each lie. The weeks passed in this terrible routine. Elena would wake early, clean the house, prepare meals she wouldn't be allowed to eat at the table, and spend her evenings alone in her small bedroom while Maria watched television in the living room. Elena had always been a social person, someone who found joy in conversation and connection, but now she went days without speaking to another human being beyond the grocery store clerk who bagged her purchases. She grew thinner and sadder with each passing day. Her clothes hung loose on her shrinking frame, and dark circles formed under her eyes from nights spent crying quietly into her pillow. But still, she told herself she could endure it. For Lucas, she could endure anything. The October air was crisp with the promise of winter when Elena received the call that would change everything. "Mom," Lucas's voice came through the phone, clearer than usual. "I have some good news. I'm getting emergency leave. There was a mix-up with my deployment schedule, and I get to come home for a few weeks while they sort it out." Elena's heart leaped with joy and terror in equal measure. "When?" she managed to ask. "Tomorrow," Lucas said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll be home by dinner time. I can't wait to see you and Maria. I've missed you both so much." Elena's hands shook as she hung up the phone. Tomorrow, Lucas would be home. Tomorrow, he would see what his wife had done to his mother. Elena didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. That night, she barely slept. She kept imagining Lucas walking into the kitchen to find her eating off the floor, kept seeing the shock and hurt that would cross his face. She considered trying to talk to Maria, to beg her to let things return to normal for just the few weeks Lucas would be home, but she knew it was useless. Maria had made her feelings clear. The next evening, Elena sat on the kitchen floor with her dinner plate, mechanically chewing food that tasted like sawdust. She had spent the day cleaning the house until it sparkled, preparing all of Lucas's favorite foods, making sure everything would be perfect for his homecoming. But she knew that nothing could hide what she had become in his absence. She heard Maria's car pull into the driveway, followed by another car she didn't recognize. Her heart began to pound. Lucas was home. Elena quickly finished what she could of her meal and washed her plate in the sink, trying to compose herself. She smoothed her hair, pinched her cheeks to bring some color to her pale face, and waited. The front door opened, and she heard Lucas's voice, deep and warm and so achingly familiar. "Maria, I'm home." "Lucas." Maria's voice was bright and welcoming, so different from the cold tone Elena had grown accustomed to. "I missed you so much." Elena heard them embracing in the hallway, heard Lucas asking about his mother. "Where's Mom?" he asked. "I want to see her." "She's in the kitchen," Maria replied, and Elena caught something strange in her voice. "She's just finishing dinner." Elena heard Lucas's boots on the hardwood floor, getting closer to the kitchen. She stood frozen by the sink, not knowing whether to run to him or hide. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. "Mom?" Lucas called as he rounded the corner into the kitchen. Elena turned toward her son's voice, tears already streaming down her face at the sight of him. He looked older, more mature in his uniform, but his eyes were still the same warm brown she had looked into when he was a baby. "Mijo," she whispered, moving toward him. But Lucas had stopped moving. His eyes had fallen to the paper plate still sitting on the kitchen floor next to the dog's water bowl, and his face went white. "What is that?" he asked quietly. Elena followed his gaze and realized with horror that she had forgotten to pick up the plate. There it sat, with remnants of her dinner still visible, next to the dog's bowl on the cold tile floor. I was just," Elena stammered, but no words would come. Lucas looked from the plate to his mother's thin frame, her hollow cheeks, the shame written across her face. His jaw tightened, and Elena saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "were you eating off the floor?" Elena couldn't speak. She couldn't lie to her son's face, but she couldn't bear to tell him the truth either. "Answer me," Lucas said, his voice still quiet but filled with steel. "Were you eating your meals off the floor?" Elena nodded, just once, and Lucas's face transformed. She had seen him angry before, but never like this. This was cold, controlled fury. "How long?" he asked. "Lucas, please," Elena whispered. "It's not important." "How long, Mom?" 3 months, she admitted in a voice barely above a whisper. Lucas closed his eyes, and Elena saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with a pain that broke Elena's heart all over again. "Maria!" he called, his voice echoing through the house. Maria appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Elena saw her face pale when she took in the scene. The plate on the floor, Elena's tears, Lucas's expression. "Lucas," Maria began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Have you been making my mother eat off the floor like a dog?" Maria's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Answer me," Lucas roared, and both women jumped. She was being difficult," Maria finally stammered. "She wouldn't listen, wouldn't stay out of my way. I had to do something." "You had to do something?" Lucas repeated, his voice rising. "You had to humiliate my mother? You had to treat the woman who raised me, who welcomed you into this family, like she was less than human?" "You don't understand," Maria pleaded, "living with her every day, having to deal with her constant interference." "Interference?" Lucas's voice cracked. "My mother trying to help you is interference? My mother trying to be part of this family is interference? He turned to Elena, and his voice became gentle again. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie to me on the phone? Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You were so far away, Miho. You were serving your country. I didn't want to worry you with problems at home. Problems? Lucas shook his head. Mom, this isn't a problem. This is cruelty. This is abuse. He knelt down and picked up the paper plate from the floor, holding it up for Maria to see. This ends now, he said, his voice carrying the authority of his military training. My mother will never eat off this floor again. She will never be treated with anything less than the respect she deserves in this house. Lucas, please, Maria tried again. Let me explain. There is no explanation, Lucas cut her off. There is no excuse for what you've done. My mother sacrificed everything for me, worked 2 jobs to put me through school, supported my dreams even when they meant leaving her alone. And you repaid her love by treating her like an animal? Elena watched her son, seeing the man he had become. The boy who used to climb into her lap when he was scared had grown into someone strong and principled, someone who would stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. I trusted you, Lucas continued, his voice breaking slightly. When I left, I trusted you to take care of the most important person in my life. I believed you when you promised to treat her like your own mother. I tried, Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face now. But she was always there, always in the way, always reminding me that this was her house first. It was never her house first, Lucas said firmly. This has always been our house, our family's house. And she is family, Maria. She's not a guest you can dismiss when she becomes inconvenient. She's not a burden you can abuse when I'm not here to protect her. He stood up and walked over to Elena, taking her hands in his. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I trusted someone who would hurt you. I'm sorry you suffered in silence to protect me. Elena cupped her son's face in her hands, seeing the little boy she had raised alongside the strong man he had become. You're here now, Miho, she whispered. That's all that matters. Lucas pulled his mother into a fierce embrace, holding her like he had when he was young and afraid of thunderstorms. Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months, safe. When they separated, Lucas turned back to Maria, his expression hard again. Pack your things, he said quietly. What? Maria's voice was barely a whisper. Pack your things and get out of this house, Lucas repeated. Tonight. Lucas, please, Maria begged. I'm your wife. This is my home too. You stopped being my wife the moment you put my mother's food on that floor, Lucas replied. And you lost the right to call this place home when you decided my mother didn't deserve to eat at our table. You can't just throw me out, Maria protested. We're married. You can't just end our marriage over this. I'm not ending our marriage over this, Lucas said, his voice cold. You ended our marriage when you broke the most important promise you ever made to me. When you decided that the woman who gave me life, who sacrificed everything for me, wasn't worthy of basic human dignity. Elena watched as Maria realized that Lucas meant every word. The confident, cold woman who had terrorized Elena for months was crumbling. Where am I supposed to go? Maria asked. I don't care, Lucas replied. You can go to your sister's. You can go to a hotel. You can go wherever people go when they destroy the most important relationships in their lives. But you're not staying here, and you're not staying married to me. Lucas, please, Elena said softly, placing a hand on her son's arm. Maybe we should talk about this more calmly. Lucas looked at his mother with amazement. Mom, after everything she's done to you, you're still trying to protect her? I'm trying to protect you, mijo. Marriage is sacred. Don't make a decision you might regret when your anger cools. My anger isn't going to cool, Lucas said firmly. What she did to you is unforgivable. I could never trust her again, never look at her the same way. How could I stay married to someone who would treat my mother like that? He looked back at Maria, who was still standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. You have 1 hour, he said. Take whatever you can carry and get out. Maria opened her mouth to argue, but something in Lucas's expression stopped her. She looked at Elena one last time, and Elena saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. I'm sorry, Maria whispered, though Elena wasn't sure if she was talking to her or to Lucas. Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing up the stairs to their bedroom. Lucas and Elena stood in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of Maria packing above them. Lucas picked up the paper plate from the counter where he had placed it and threw it in the trash with more force than necessary. Mom, he said, turning back to Elena, I need you to promise me something. What is it, mijo? Promise me that if anything like this ever happens again, if anyone ever treats you with anything less than the respect you deserve, you'll tell me immediately. Don't protect me from it. Don't suffer in silence. I'm a grown man, and I can handle whatever problems come up at home. Elena nodded, tears still flowing down her cheeks. I promise. Good, Lucas said, then looked around the kitchen. Now, let's make this right. Are you hungry? Do you want me to fix you a proper meal at the proper table? Elena smiled through her tears. I would like that very much. As Lucas busied himself reheating the dinner Elena had prepared earlier, Elena watched her son and felt her heart beginning to heal. The man moving confidently around her kitchen was the same little boy who used to help her cook, standing on a step stool to reach the counter. He had grown into someone strong and principled, someone who would fight for what was right. An hour later, Maria came downstairs with 2 suitcases. She paused in the kitchen doorway, watching Lucas serve his mother dinner at the dining room table where Elena belonged. Lucas, she tried one more time, please, can't we work this out? Can't we go to counseling or something? Lucas didn't even look up. There's nothing to work out. What you did was a choice. You chose to be cruel to someone who never did anything but love you. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. People make mistakes, Maria said desperately. People can change. Some mistakes are too big to forgive, Lucas replied. Some actions reveal character in ways that can't be undone. You showed me who you are, Maria. I believe you. Maria stood there for another moment, then walked to the front door. They heard it open and close, heard her car start and drive away. The house felt different immediately, like a weight had been lifted. Lucas sat down across from his mother at the dining room table and watched her take her first bite of food, eaten with dignity in months. Tell me about these past few months, he said gently. I want to know everything. I want to understand how I failed you. You didn't fail me, mijo, Elena protested. I did, Lucas insisted. I left you with someone who hurt you. I didn't see the signs when we talked on the phone. I didn't protect you when you needed protection. Elena reached across the table and took her son's hand. You were serving your country. You were doing what you were supposed to do. I chose not to tell you because I didn't want to distract you from your duty. My first duty is to you, Lucas said firmly. My country is important, but you're my family. You're the reason I fight, the reason I serve, to protect people like you, people I love." They talked late into the night, Elena finally telling Lucas everything that had happened in his absence. She told him about the gradual change in Maria's behavior, about the cruel words and the isolation, about the nights she cried herself to sleep, wondering what she had done wrong. Lucas listened to every word, his jaw tight with anger and his eyes bright with unshed tears. When Elena finished, he reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "I am so proud of you," he said. "You endured all of that with dignity and grace. You protected me even when it cost you everything. That's the kind of strength they try to teach us in the military, but you already had it." "I didn't feel strong," Elena admitted. "I felt small and worthless." "You are neither of those things," Lucas said fiercely. "You are the strongest person I know. You raised me to be the man I am today. You taught me right from wrong, taught me to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Everything good about me comes from you." Elena felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of healing rather than pain. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Lucas said. "I'm going to extend my leave as long as possible. I'm going to file for divorce from Maria, and we're going to make this house feel like home again. We're going to eat every meal together at this table, and we're going to remember what it feels like to be a family." "What about your career, your dreams of flying?" Lucas smiled. "My dreams are still intact, Mom, but they're built on a foundation of love and family, and I almost let someone destroy that foundation. I won't make that mistake again." Over the following days, Lucas made good on his promises. He contacted his commanding officer and explained the situation, receiving extended leave to handle his personal affairs. He met with a divorce attorney and began the process of ending his marriage to Maria. Most importantly, he devoted himself to helping his mother heal from months of abuse and neglect. They established new routines together. Every morning, they would have coffee on the back porch, talking about their plans for the day. Every evening, they would cook dinner together, Elena teaching Lucas family recipes he had forgotten, and Lucas sharing stories from his time in the Air Force. Elena began to gain weight again, her cheeks filling out and color returning to her complexion. She started laughing again, something Lucas realized he hadn't heard in months. The house filled with the sounds of conversation and music and life. Word of what had happened spread through their small community, and Elena was amazed by the outpouring of support she received. Neighbors who had been distant during Maria's reign of terror came by with flowers and food, apologizing for not seeing what was happening and offering their friendship. "I should have known something was wrong," their neighbor Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table that had become a gathering place once again. "Maria always seemed so cold when I would wave, and I noticed you stopped working in your garden." "It's not your fault," Elena assured her. "I was hiding what was happening. I was ashamed." "You have nothing to be ashamed of," Lucas said firmly, from where he was fixing the kitchen faucet. "The shame belongs entirely to Maria." 3 weeks until Lucas's extended leave, Maria called. Elena answered the phone, not recognizing the number. "Elena?" Maria's voice was small and uncertain. "It's me, Maria." Elena looked at Lucas, who was reading a book in his father's old chair. He looked up at the sound of Maria's name and shook his head firmly. "What do you want, Maria?" Elena asked. "I want to apologize. Maria said, her voice cracking. I want to explain. There's nothing to explain, Elena replied, and apologies don't undo what you did. Please, Maria begged. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I was struggling too. I felt overwhelmed and alone, and I took it out on you instead of dealing with my own problems. Elena felt a familiar stir of sympathy. Despite everything, part of her wanted to forgive, wanted to understand. I appreciate that you're sorry, Elena said carefully. But sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the months of dignity you stole from me. I want to make it right, Maria insisted. I want to earn your forgiveness. Some things can't be made right, Elena replied, finding strength in her voice she hadn't known she still possessed. Some actions have consequences that can't be undone. What about Lucas? Maria asked desperately. Don't you want him to be happy? Don't you want him to have his wife back? Elena looked at her son, who was watching her with pride and admiration. Lucas is happy, Elena said firmly. He's happy because he's living according to his values, standing up for what's right, protecting the people he loves. That's the man I raised him to be, and I'm proud of him. Elena, please. Maria tried one more time. Goodbye, Maria, Elena said, and hung up the phone. Lucas got up from his chair and hugged his mother. I'm proud of you too, Mom, he said. That took courage. I learned from the best, Elena replied, squeezing her son tight. As Lucas's leave came to an end, both he and Elena felt anxious about his return to duty. The healing process had been good for both of them, but they worried about maintaining their progress when separated again. I don't want to leave you alone again, Lucas said on their last evening together. What if you need me? What if something happens? Elena took her son's hands in hers, the same gesture that had comforted him as a child. Mijo, I'm not the same woman you left 3 months ago, she said. I'm stronger now. I know my worth again. I know that I deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and I won't accept anything less. But you accepted it from Maria, Lucas pointed out. I accepted it because I thought it was temporary, because I thought I was protecting you, Elena explained. But you've taught me that protecting you doesn't mean hiding the truth from you. It means trusting you to handle the truth, even when it's difficult. Lucas nodded, understanding. You'll call me if anything happens? You'll tell me the truth? I promise, Elena said solemnly. And you'll remember that this is your home, that you belong here, that you deserve every good thing life has to offer. I'll remember, Elena promised. The next morning, as Lucas prepared to return to his base, Elena felt sad but not afraid. She had her son back, not just physically, but emotionally. She had remembered who she was, what she was worth, what she deserved. As she watched Lucas drive away, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude. She was grateful for a son who loved her enough to fight for her, grateful for the strength to survive her darkest months, grateful for the chance to rebuild and heal. The house was quiet without Lucas, but it no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful, like a home should feel. Elena walked through the rooms, straightening pictures and watering plants, feeling the satisfaction of caring for a space that was truly hers. She had learned something important in the past few weeks. Love wasn't just about sacrifice and endurance. Sometimes, love meant standing up and demanding better. Sometimes, love meant refusing to accept less than you deserved. Elena smiled as she prepared her lunch, setting her plate at the dining room table where it belonged. She was home, in every sense of the word. She was valued, she was loved, and she was free. That evening, when Lucas called from his base, Elena's voice was strong and clear. "How are you, Mom?" he asked. "I'm wonderful, mijo," she replied, and for the first time in months, it was completely true. "I'm exactly where I belong,